Can you please start out by saying and spelling your name for us?
Yes, it's Sue Corbin, Corbin.
And Sue, what is your connection to Kent State?
I was a student here from 1970 to 1973, and then I came back and got my master's and my doctorate here, so I have 3 degrees, and I've also taught at Kent State, so it's sort of in my blood, I guess.
And what's your connection to May 4th, 1970 at Kent?
I was there on the Commons protesting on May 4th. I had been away from campus over the weekend, but had come back Sunday night and was living in Terrace Hall right next to President White's house, so witnessed a lot of action by the guards against students even Sunday night. So.
And maybe you can describe for us what you remember.
My room was facing President White's home, so there were tanks outside of my window. The guards were shining lights into our window all night long. We watched them taking students and pushing them up against the fence there and hitting them with the butts of their guns, students who were just trying to get back to their dorms. The doors had been locked in Terrace Hall, and we, a number of us were going around trying to open up the doors so that we could let students in because they were getting hurt by being out there. And I remember calling my mom that night, and I said, "You better start praying because I think something really awful is going to happen here." So that was Sunday night, and then Monday, I had a midterm I was supposed to be taking. And I went to the class, and the professor said, "I don't think any of us are in the mood to take a test today. Just go back to your dorms and try to recoup." And walking past the guards with their bayonets out along the sidewalks and tanks everywhere, it was just surreal. And it was a beautiful day. I remember there were kids out tanning and just kind of sitting around and enjoying the day, and very, very quiet and peaceful. And then I sat down on my way back to my dorm on the Commons at that time. It was about maybe 10 in the morning, and there were some journalists there who were talking and saying, "Well, we'll probably go home today. It looks pretty quiet." But that all ended, of course, at noon when we had the rally, and I went to that because it was supposed to be a rally that was protesting the guards being on our campus. There was really no need, especially on Monday. There was nothing happening. So I remained on the Commons the whole time, and we sort of went with handkerchiefs, that were soaked in water so that, we could protect ourselves against the tear gas. And the only thing I ever saw any students throwing at the guards would have been some tear gas canisters that they had thrown at us, but they had the gas masks, so. And I remember one student who was going around telling everybody to go home. He kept saying, "Go back, we shouldn't be out here." And people were just laughing at him, I remember. And of course, you could feel the tension building with the guards. They didn't seem to be very, very well trained. Some of them were so young. And they had just come from the Teamster strike here in Cleveland. In fact, my husband and I had gotten engaged the weekend before that and had been in Cleveland and went downtown to get a ring at J.B. Robinson's, and we were driving back home, and there were guards up above the interstate on the overpass there, and I remember we were flashing the peace sign at them, and they were flashing back at us, and the next weekend they were shooting at us. And I think they were tired, but none of us ever thought that they would have live ammunition, You know, that was just, it was beyond what you could imagine. And when we heard the shots and saw the smoke on the other side of Taylor Hall, we were just kept thinking they must have firecrackers. Somebody must be throwing out firecrackers. And then there was a kid who came running down the hill, and he had a bloody T-shirt in his hand, and he said, "They're killing us." And we couldn't believe it. I think a lot of us just were in shock at that point. And there were rumors that there had been some guards who were shot also. We really didn't know what was going on, but we didn't want to go back behind Taylor Hall where all of that was going on. So we stayed on the Commons. Professor Frank was there, and he had a megaphone, and he was trying to calm us down. Of course, we were afraid, and there were a lot of angry people too, but I think most of us were just really afraid. I remember him saying, "We need to sit down and just have some peace. We need to have some silence. And I don't want anybody trying to run off of here because these people will kill you." And I remember we sat, I don't know how many of us there were, several hundred at least. But I remember looking around, and completely surrounding us were guards, people who had just shot with their bayonets out, surrounding the entire Commons. And again, it just felt like this was something totally out of reality. And Professor Frank asked us to just walk back to our dorms and try to get home the best we could. But the guards had cut the phone lines. There was no way to call home. There was no way to contact anybody. Fortunately, I had a car on campus. I had a friend who lived in Buffalo, and there was no way she could get in touch with her parents, so we went back. We tried to go back home. It was difficult because there was so much traffic, and I remember going back into my dorm room right afterwards, and I was living with a senior who, I don't know what she was thinking, but she was angry at the students, thinking that we had brought this on ourselves, and that was so hard to hear. But we did make it home, and I remember my uncle calling me and saying, "Well, you know, I would have shot more of them, and I would have shot sooner." And I ran into that a lot. It was amazing how many people felt like that the students had brought this on themselves for burning down a building. You know, you don't kill people for that. I went to Canada shortly after that with my Volkswagen, and it had a Kent State sticker on it, and I was driving through a construction area, and I remember construction workers shouting at me, calling me a murderer because I was from Kent State. It was just really odd, the kinds of reactions that people had. And it hurts all these years later. This is really a hard thing for me to do today, but I felt it was really important. But the pain never goes away. I was just a kid 40 years ago, 19, and they sort of took away my innocence, but changed me, I think, in some ways that have been important. I became a teacher, and I've taught Holocaust literature and tried to help kids to see how important it is to really think about what you're doing and try to do what you can to make it a more peaceful world rather than fighting all the time. So it was a life-changing moment for me, but difficult.
What do you think people should learn from what happened at Kent State?
Well, I think one thing a lot of us learned that had never occurred to us before, that you can get hurt for standing up for what you believe in. And that was kind of shocking to a lot of Midwestern kids. But I learned that that shouldn't stop you. I think it's important that even though 40 years later, if I had thought then that we would still be fussing around with wars all over the world that we shouldn't be involved in, I'm not sure I would have believed it. I think a lot of us really thought that what we were doing was going to make a difference. And I suppose we did make a difference in some ways, but there's still hate, there's still prejudice, there's still greed, and so I guess we just have to keep working for it, though. I teach Holocaust literature, and I have a friend whose husband was in the camps, survived 4 different camps, and when he was released at the end of the war, of course there was nowhere to go. People just had to start walking back to their homes or wherever they could get. And Sam said that as he was walking through a town, a woman came up to him and gave him an apple. And he said that was the first time he'd felt like a human being since the war started. And his wife was a good friend of mine, and she always told me whenever I started to get discouraged about things not changing fast enough, she always said, you don't have to change the world. You just have to give somebody an apple. And that's, I think, a really important lesson, that, you have to do something. Even if it's small, it's something.
Have you shared your story about your experience at Kent in a public forum before?
20 years ago, we did an oral history, and that's still, I believe that's in the archives at Kent Library, Kent State Library. But I share a lot with my students. Of course, it's ancient history to them now, but I do. I think it's important to continue to teach it.
Do you still think we need answers about what happened that day?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a travesty that this is still going on, the questions, what really happened. I mean, that should have been taken care of 40 years ago. And people knew, people know. I would not want to be one who was carrying that guilt all these years. I imagine that's been one way that they've been meant to pay for what they did, but absolutely, we need to know the truth.
What do you think needs to be done to address that?
Well, I think that the tape that Alan has gotten, that Terry Struby did, is an important piece, definitely. There have been a number of investigations, but I think that tape seems to be one of the more concrete things that we've had to go by.
Maybe you want to describe what the tape is for people that aren't familiar.
Yeah, it's a tape that Terry Struby, who was a student here at the time, just an audio tape, did of the shootings. He had the tape recorder sitting on, I guess, on his dorm window, recording what was going on. And I listened to it online. NPR has a copy of it, both the original version and an enhanced version. And you can hear something that sounds like Reddy point fire. Now, I'm not sure why they would say point instead of aim, but you can hear it. It's there. So it seems to me that if they can use that, they may be able to prove that there was an order to fire given. And that should dispel the rumors about, a student sniper and all of these crazy things that people have tried to use as an excuse up until now.
Is there anything we haven't asked you that you think is important to share with us?
Not that I can think of. I guess I'm really grateful that you're doing this. I think it's really important, and I really do hope that people listen and pay attention. I guess, you hear people say often, well, it happened 40 years ago, forget it, move on. But we can't afford to do that. Can't afford to forget the Holocaust, can't afford to forget Kent State or Jackson or any place that people's rights have been taken away from them, and travesty has been ruining, innocent lives for so long. We have to stop it however we can.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your truth with us today.
Thank you.